Your Inner Light Show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is Risa Kaparo, Ph.D., a psychotherapist, developer of Somatic Learning, which she taught at MIT, John F. Kennedy University, and Dalian Medical University in China, and is the author of Awakening Somatic Intelligence. Learn how to release pain and become more supple physically and mentally. Welcome, Risa.
Thank you, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, Risa, why do we diminish ourselves, and is this the root cause of our aches and pains, this diminishment?
It's a great question, actually, the way that you articulating the problem. What I'm assuming that you're referring to as diminishment is that we have an image that we form of ourselves. I often talk about that as, how you might look to me if you were standing in front of me, or how I might look in the mirror a couple feet away, is basically an image that gives me a sense of what I'm seeing as being object-like, relatively fixed, and from the outside, it really looks like an object, doesn't it? And the self, we begin to attribute that same kind of permanence and continuity and object-likeness to as well. So inferentially, we infer that what must be going on here at no distance, right, is the same as what we're seeing at a distance. And so we relate to ourselves object-like based on images. And that's what I'm assuming you're referring to as this diminishment, which is the cause of so many problems that we have. And the remedy for those problems, in a sense, is being able to have an inside-out awareness. That's what we mean by somatic, actually. The word soma comes from the Greek term that is often roughly translated as body into English. But, that's actually a misnomer. In fact, in the West, we often think of body and mind as separate things. And this book that I wrote is about embodied mindfulness, this quality of awakening intelligence that's an inside-out, how life knows itself in the kind of bubbling, bursting, blooming forth of consciousness all at once.
Well, what I want to ask you at this point is it's very hard not to form an opinion of ourselves based on external feedback. I think that's what we wrestle with throughout life, what our parents, what our teachers, what our friends tell us. And some of it is a reality check. I mean, I can't go around thinking this without that kind of... I think Dr. Herbert Mead wrote The Looking Glass Self. We need that. So how is it, and I like the point you made in your book, how do we attain sovereignty over the mind-body?
Well, I want to try to address the questions because it's a complex question that you bring up, and I might rephrase it slightly, Debbie, because
Go right ahead.
that it's really not sovereignty over. It's like the difference between having power over or control over versus being empowered to, right? So it's not that we get sovereignty over the mind-body, it's that we come into our sovereignty, meaning that we come into our greatest freedom and aliveness by allowing this natural intelligence to function without constraint by the rigid habit patterns of our thought and identifications. And that translates directly into the habit patterns of our tension and rigidities in the body. And so, because this intelligence is in itself self-sensing, self-organizing, and self-renewing, that's the hallmark of this native intelligence that we're all born with. I mean, it's a gift, actually, that comes with our embodiment as human beings, to be born into the most finely tuned feedback system that's ever been imagined. When you think about what, what we need, like in terms of a medical operating arena, just to, for instance, take the heart offline for just a few minutes in a bypass surgery or something like that, how many computers and so forth are trying to regulate so many complex and subtle interactions that are happening just to maintain our lives for minutes at a time. And we're born into so much more of a subtle learning system. But because we've kind of gotten caught in an identification with being so much smaller, as you say, so much diminished, we start to protect and sort of defend our system in ways that really aren't helpful to us, and they exacerbate the problems that we have, so that pain becomes chronic pain. And in fact, right now, 116 million people in the United States alone are suffering from chronic pain. It's incredible.
And so many people tell me that they suffer from back pain. In fact, there was some research done that we sit too much and that we have to get up and move. And people are afraid during this recession of losing their job or trying to get a job, and so work hours that I think are beyond what we can physically handle. And Risa, we are a nation becoming fast of caregivers, and that brings about chronic stress. So when you write about somatic learning, how does that differ from yoga?
Okay. That's a good question. One of the main differences is that somatic learning is a methodology for awakening up or engaging this native intelligence, and it can use many different forms of practices. In other words,
let's hold that thought for 1 second. I don't want to rush it because it's an interesting point. We're going to a commercial break, and we will return with Dr. Risa Kaparo, author of Awakening Somatic Intelligence.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Life, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving, and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Life show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with Dr. Risa Kaparo, author of Awakening Somatic Intelligence. Now, before commercial break, Risa, you were distinguishing somatic learning from yoga.
Yeah, yoga, by the way, is one of the disciplines that we use to teach somatic learning through, and it allows us to take the practice off the mat, not just in the time that people allocate for yoga. In fact, in my book, there's the majority of it is under a section called Anytime, Anywhere Practices, that allows you to integrate this quality of embodied mindfulness in every activity that you do, whether you're sitting at your desk working on the computer, whether you're walking, whether you're standing and brushing your teeth, or actually in speaking, in listening, in really all the activities, eating, that we have in life in general. And so it's a way of really building kind of the mindfulness muscle in the context of things that we're doing as part of our everyday life, so that in just a few minutes a day, you can begin to shift into a much more highly refined awareness that's an inside-out way of presencing in the moment your experience and activating the capacity of your system to regulate, re-regulate, to organize, to renew itself in the context of everything that you're doing throughout the day.
So that might work, let's say if somebody has back pain. In other words, you would become more aware of how you're sitting, how you're standing. If you're sitting too much, should you be walking? What's out of balance, so that and you might give that person some exercises to do, or elongation postures as you do in the book, so that you are more aware of, I guess, your posture at all times to minimize the pain. Is that correct?
Yeah, to eliminate the causes of the pain, basically, by engaging your system in what it's most capable of doing, which is, as you begin to be more self-sensing, your system regulates. Even if you're walking, for instance, and maybe the best thing I can do is give you some examples.
Oh, wonderful, yes.
From people, who have worked in this area. I'm thinking of Marty, who came into somatic learning to study somatic learning. He was the founder and CEO of a very successful business, but was really struggling with chronic pain, sometimes absolutely debilitating. He came in because bone spurs in his neck had left him, even with all the medical interventions he had and the medications he was taking, still without relief. And
are those medications painkillers, anti-inflammatories?
Yes, yes, anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxers, and the like. And what was interesting is, in the context of learning to feel the support of gravity through the practices that he was doing, actually releasing the holdings that he had in his body, so that he could really feel the support coming up from the ground, whether he was standing or walking, and the way that support literally buoyed his head, so that his head was floating rather than held up through his musculature, and his spine decompressed. In that movement, there was so much de-densifying in his structure that, just as an unexpected consequence of his practices in the first year, he shed 50 pounds from his large frame, and without
that
even
would explain
dieting,
but that would explain a lot of his problem too. So let's say I had aches and pains. I could take a different approach. I could strength train my body. I could do stretching exercises. I could walk. I could manage my weight system. If I'm overweight, I mean, you can bet your bottom dollars I'm going to have pains in my knees and probably my lower back, depending if I carry the weight in my abdomen. So couldn't I do all of this with just regular kind of balanced living, and shedding stress, because we all have different weak links in our body, and stress might have. So maybe he's the CEO and maybe he carries his stress in his neck. So maybe if I just chill out, you know. You know what I really love, Risa? The placebo effect. If I believe it's going to work, it's going to work.
Yeah, well...
What do you think about the placebo effect? Does it have validity?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no question in terms of the evidence behind the placebo effect. In fact, we've now discovered one of the most interesting research that's been done in the area was a knee surgeon trying to determine what were the most important parts of the knee surgery and what might be eliminated to make it less complex. And somebody said, well, you should first test to see, to have a control group that doesn't actually receive the surgery and see how they fare. And so they put them through the entire protocol of going through a local anesthetic injection and making an incision point and being able to see in the operating theater the video going on as if they're actually doing the surgery. And in a 2-year follow-up, the people who had the placebo surgery actually didn't receive any surgery on their knee, just looked like they were receiving a surgery on the knee, did just as well, equally as well as the people who received the surgery.
Yeah, I think doctors use that a lot. Here's a pill for you. and if you believe this is going to work, it just might. And there's also the nocebo effect, right? That if you think it's not, then it won't either. So we have to
Well, the nocebo effect actually, Debbie, gets even more, it's actually something to be really alerted of, which is your belief system can have a negative effect on your system.
Well, we're going to a commercial break, Risa, and we will return with Awakening Somatic Intelligence. Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is the message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers. We're back with Dr. Risa Kaparo, author of Awakening Somatic Intelligence. Risa, you wrote this very interesting comment in the book about the myth of deep breathing. Could you explain that?
Yes, I can. I feel like I want to kind of finish, if we can, just before the commercial break.
All right. It's just that I want to give us a free romp, and this we just have a couple of minutes, and
Okay. So the question that you were asking about of the myth of a deep breath, we often think that you can just suck in, a lot of air, and we emphasize this a lot. Oh, take a deep breath, as if there's something that you can enact on your inhalation that will draw air much deeper into the lungs. And in fact, we can draw it into the upper lobes of the lungs more and through this efforted suction that we create. But we really can't move the breath into most of the lungs or have what's called a tidal breath, meaning a full exchange of oxygen from our lungs, from anything we enact on the inhalation, we have these diaphragms of exhalation that will allow us to engage all the way from the pelvic floor, all the way up along our back and what's called the peritoneum. And as we use these diaphragms to exhale completely, then there's something that creates an equalized pressure in the thoracic. So as soon as we release those diaphragms at the end of exhalation, and I want to invite all your viewers to try this right now, because just this one thing can make such a difference in our lives in terms of how much oxygen we get into the blood and our cellular respiration, our capacity for self-renewal and moving toxins out of the system and so forth. If we exhale from the floor of our pelvis and continue to feel like we're exhaling up and along our back to activate the peritoneum, it's almost feeling like our kidneys are making this gentle embrace. As we empty, then we can slowly release those diaphragms, and you can feel the breath come to you without any extra effort. In other words, we don't have to grasp after the breath to pull it in. It will come to us and fully all the way to our lower lobes of the lungs and create this tidal breath, a full exchange of oxygen through the lungs.
You know, it sounds very beautiful and poetic. What I tell people to do is to get a deeper breath where they feel more relaxed is to inhale 2 counts through the nose and exhale 4 counts through the nose. And that usually encourages a deeper breath. I think it might take a lot of practice for me to relax, different organs of my body or in that depth. And you're using the term diaphragms, I guess, clinically as opposed to the diaphragm breathing. But that's something that takes practice, and whatever works for people, that's good. Now, you have a website, and aren't you going to be in our neck of the woods? Could you tell us, how we can learn more about your work?
Yes, I am. Thank you. First of all, my website is somaticlearning.com. SOMAT.
We can spell.
Some people hear it, like especially on the radio, somatic, or they hear other terms. But anyway, somatic learning. And if people want to go to the website, they can find a lot of resources there. A blog, they can sign up and get a free introductory video on somatic learning. And they can find the book that you've mentioned as well.
And our time together has flown. I know we're more leisurely in California. Well,
okay.
Have a nice day, as they say there. And thank you for being a very comforting guest. I just love listening to your voice.
Oh, well, thank you, Debbie. It's my pleasure.
Affirmation of the week. Develop a sixth sense for what's important. And now for the latest medical trends. A study performed in mice and utilizing post-mortem samples of brains from patients with Alzheimer's disease found that a single event of a moderate to severe traumatic brain injury can disrupt proteins that regulate an enzyme associated with Alzheimer's. In other words, a blow to the head in youth can even trigger Alzheimer's later on. Psychological abuse may be the most challenging and prevalent form of child abuse and neglect, experts say in an American Academy of Pediatrics position statement on psychological maltreatment. A study from the journal Anesthesiology provides evidence contrary to prior reports that fever in laboring women is associated with epidural analgesia. So, there has been no such association. And UCLA researchers have found that practicing a certain form of yogic meditation for just 12 minutes daily leads to a reduction in the biological mechanisms responsible for an increase in the immune system's inflammation response. Inflammation, if constantly activated, can contribute to a multitude of chronic health problems. So it might be worth your while to take the time and practice meditation. And when you do, there's absolutely no pressure. You don't have to think of anything at all. It's really mindless to become mindful. According to the American Sociological Association, policies that reward abstinence from terrorism are more successful in reducing such acts of violence than the tactics that aim to punish terrorists. Well, hopefully we can achieve some kind of balance in the world. Vitamin D deficiency is associated with worse lung function and more rapid decline in lung function over time in smokers, suggesting that vitamin D may have a protective effect against the effects of smoking on lung function. This is a new study from researchers in Boston. And high consumption of vitamin E, either from diet or vitamin supplements, may lower the risk of liver cancer. This is from Vanderbilt University. And people are more likely to show forgiving behavior if they get an apology more than a restitution. Well, we come to the close of another show. I have an educational website, totally free, on stress management, turnonyourinnerlight.com. And all the radio shows with the guest experts are archived for your listening pleasure at your convenience. Click on my site, take you directly into YouTube. Subscribe to my free newsletter at turnonyourinnerlight.com, and you'll get a fresh new article on stress management, the latest radio show, and the health tips fully delineated, especially the ones I didn't get to tell you, emailed directly to you from turnonyourinnerlight.com.